Welcome to Sports Geek, the podcast built for sports digital and sports business professionals. And now, here's your host who has a screen dedicated to streaming live sports, Sean Callanan.
Thanks, DJ Joel. My name is Sean Callanan, and welcome to episode 356 of Sports Geek. In this episode, I chat with Reuben Williams from SportsGrad. And yes, I do have a screen dedicated to watching live sports. And the good thing about being in my part of the world, there is always live sports on. You might be listening to this episode. You might be doing so from our website, sportsgeekhq.com. It's also available on all platforms, Google, Apple, everything available. From an audio point of view, if I would be so kind to leave a review, especially on Apple. It does help get new listeners. Thank you for those who've left them before. Really do appreciate it. Before I get stuck into my catch up with Reuben Williams from SportsGrad, just want to remind you, now is a great time to do a digital review or an audit of what you're doing, whether that is how are you tackling particular platforms, are your assets secure, do you have a particular goal that you want to reach on a particular platform with a particular demographic? That's what we do. That's what we've been doing for the last 12, 13 years now. You can always reach me, Sean at sportsgeekhq.com. Happy to discuss what best practice looks like, how you can get your team to that place. We work really well with under-resourced teams, optimizing their talent and getting the results that you're looking for. But now what I want to do is get into my chat with Reuben Williams, the co-founder of SportsGrad. Very happy to welcome Reuben Williams. He is a co-founder of SportsGrad. Welcome to the podcast.
Pleasure to be here, Sean. Long time listener, so happy to be chatting with you.
Terrific. So this is either a return one. So if you've listened to the episode in SportsGrad and you've come here, welcome. If you haven't listened to that episode and you're a Sports Geek listener, I did a podcast chat with Reuben where he interviewed me from a Sports Geek podcast.
Well worth checking out. That was a great chat.
So you can check out both. We'll put links in the show notes as we do. But I always start out asking podcast guests how they got their start in sports. How did you get your start in sports?
Yeah, great question. I actually came out of high school thinking that sports was too hard. And I kind of got funneled into a marketing degree at RMIT, and I thought, let's just find a safe job in any old industry doing something that's relatively interesting. Why was
sports too hard?
I always just got fed the news that it's a competitive industry and that, not very many people make it. Like it's just one of those dream things that, it's well beyond anyone. So kind of initially turned that away and went down the typical business degree route. And then I got a year and a half through that and was literally getting 50s in my subjects. I think the university lecturers were just like pushing me through, like, get this guy out of our college. And thought, I need to get out of this degree. I'm not enjoying it. So quit that and applied for sport management and exercise science at Deakin University. And when I got there, that's when I feel like I'd probably matured a bit more and was in a much better place to actually make the most of my time at university. And when I arrived there, that's when I quickly realised actually, sport is going to be hard. You've already quit one degree. Your HECS debt is building up. You better make the most of this. Otherwise, you're going to have to turn around and look your parents in the eye and tell them, why you haven't come out of it with a job. So there was a lot more motivation and fire in the belly to make it work. And so through university, one of the things that I quickly realised it was an important thing to do was actually to get out there and network and understand what's going on in the industry. And so as I started to do this, I quickly learnt that I've got no idea about the sports industry. So I talked to more people, found out more about what roles you could do. And through the process of doing that, I learnt that a lot of my friends and peers at university weren't doing that, and they didn't have as much information about the industry coming in. And so that's when I thought, I'm having all these great conversations with people in sport. What if I just chuck them on the internet for people to watch at home? And so I created this YouTube channel called SportsGrad. And at the time, it was very, very amateur hour. I kind of just pulled together my mum's digital camera and a tripod that, Dad took traveling 25 years ago, stitched them together and recorded a couple of episodes. And so that kind of gave me a lot of confidence to go out there and chat to more and more people. And through that, I then picked up, an internship at Australian University Sport, another one at the Hawthorn Football Club, started volunteering at my local cricket club and local football club. I was doing this little side hustle for myself and had another role going at, Prahran Junior Football Club. And so by the time I got to the end of my university degree, everyone's like the standard university student resume kind of has like your degree and maybe one placement, and mine had about 8 different line items. And so when I got into Cricket Australia and had my interview there, the interview was booked for half an hour and it went for 1 hour. And 2 hours after that, I went back to the Deakin University Library to keep studying for my final exams, and got a call and left the quiet area, and it was Sharon from HR, and she said, "Reuben, we'd love to have you join the team at Cricket." And that was an unreal moment because cricket was my favourite sport. And at that time, my capacity felt like I was completely stretched. So to be able to kind of push all that aside and trade it in for one dream job was, a very nice moment.
Like terrific opener. Like you're right, the thin resume. Like again, we talked about it when we had the chat. Like LinkedIn is becoming the resume, but being able to, what were some of the things you learnt on some of those intern gigs, but then also the volunteering gigs that sort of set you up for that interview?
Yeah, so one volunteering gig that I actually forgot to mention was my role as president of the Deakin University Sports Society. And that sounds like a very fancy title, president, Deakin Uni, all that. At the time, I had just joined the committee in late second semester the year before. And at that point in time, everyone was either graduating or didn't want to be on the committee next year. So it was down to me and my mate Paul. Like the committee was down to 2 people. And Paul kind of said, "Oh, Reuben, I'm a bit busy with a bunch of other commitments. Do you want to be president?" So I was like, "All right, I guess I'm president." But again, I kind of looked at the title, president, looked at the name of the organisation, it's got Deakin in it, and thought, this can be whatever we make it to be. And so in the 3 years prior to that, the Sports Studies Club had been dwindling in membership, and it dropped from, I think, like 180 members down to 150 to 125 the year that I joined it. And I said to the new committee at the start of the next year, let's get this back up to 200. And so we kind of looked at what we can do to help our peers and how I can market the club better. So one simple thing we did was simply bring a photographer around to every single event so that people could actually see what we were doing. There were other crafty things that we did, such as during O Week when we were trying to get all those sign-ups. Our mutual friend, Scott Kilmartin, he lent me his ice cream cart, who I was casually scooping ice cream for, and gave me the leftover tubs that weren't being used and said, do what you will with this. And so every new member got a free ice cream. So we're doing little things like that. And over the course of the year, we grew the club from 125 members the year before to 213 by the end of that year. So I was able to go to Cricket Australia and say, hey, through a considered approach, we've increased membership by 71% in 1 year. And so I think one of the main things that I took out of that volunteer opportunity is that they can be just as impactful, if not more impactful, than an internship that's given to you with a very specific set of tasks. Because in that role, we had an open slather to do whatever we wanted with it. But it was not only how we did it, but also how we talked about it that ultimately gave myself and the other people in the committee what they really wanted, and that was our first job in sport.
Yep. And it's a great example because it all becomes like the principles are the same, it's just scale. And so, when someone, asks me, oh, how do I, I want to be, doing, I want to be doing Twitter for Cricket Australia and be at a World Cup. It's like, well, you can't just jump to that. But if you can show that you've built a community around your local cricket club or your local basketball club, there's so many opportunities in grassroots and local sport that, if you want to and also understanding the breadth of all the different things, because of, for people going into sport, there is that glamour of, oh, this is amazing, look at this, it's all trophies and big tournaments, but there is that grind of there's all of these roles. So was it part of also getting that breadth of having some structure in either getting a photographer and having a plan in place to realising that there's more to the business than just the single tasks or the ones that you see, whether it is on social or TV or on other forms of media?
Yeah, well, we basically had the opportunity to kind of build that society from the ground up. We weren't kind of left with too many handover documents or all these other things. So that was one. And I think I'd just taken a subject that was like sport leadership and governance, and I'd kind of seen an org structure for the first time in my life and thought, well, how can we actually divvy up the roles properly? How can we document things properly? Just not so that we can do our own jobs properly, but so when we leave in 12 months' time, the next committee's set up for success. So there was a lot of blank canvas space to play with.
And then, so getting your first role at cricket, what was your remit? What was your role when you first came into cricket?
Yeah, so my first title was digital commercial assistant, which moved into specialist, and essentially I worked across the campaigns, the digital campaigns that Australian cricket sponsors would run through us. So, for example, if Alinta Energy had a sponsorship with Cricket Australia, part of it is signage in stadium, part of it's on the shirt, part of it's on the Cricket Australia website. Yep. Anything that came across cricket.com.au or the Cricket Australia live app or even the My Cricket web apps as well, that would come through me. So I was kind of like the conduit between the digital team who are creating the assets, such as the website or the social media posts, and the partnerships team who would deal with every single line item in Alinta Energy's list of things, and help with the delivery and execution on that, as well as the reporting. So that job really actually taught me a lot about how to track numbers and how to measure growth and all those sort of things, and gave me an introduction to Google Analytics for the first time. So and prior to that, I'd never done anything in this space, but if not for a study trip that I'd done with Deacon to the US, which introduced me to kind of the biggest and best fan experiences possible, I probably wouldn't have ended up going down that space of having an interest in mixing digital and commercial. And
so the SportsGrad journey, did that just go on pause when you got a job? Did you go, oh, I've got a job. Oh, great. Because there is that flurry of activity that, hey, I want to get a job, whether you have been in a job or whether you're a new grad, and you're like, you do everything you can, whether it's telling a lot of people what you do or going to a lot of networking events, and then you land the job. Was that something that you continued on, or like what was what did the side hustle look like while you're at Cricket Australia?
Yeah, you're right, because it kind of had served my first purpose, which was get a job. And but the issue that I had was that I would get these nice messages saying, hey, Reuben, your interview with Joel Freem, the team manager of the Socceroos, really helped me. Look forward to the next one. And I was like, oh, gosh, I'm not sure when there's going to be a next one. And so from the end of 2017 to 2020, that's when I was working at Cricket Australia. And during that time, the interviews on YouTube dropped off significantly. It kind of became such a burden to try and think about doing this side channel that literally only had 30 subscribers, and trying to do my full-time job on top of that. The other piece of SportsGrad was this very black market career coaching service that I was doing. So pretty much from the day that I posted on LinkedIn, hey, I've got a job at Cricket Australia, I had people reach out and ask, how did you get your job at Cricket Australia? And that started with answering their questions and having coffee. And then I eventually thought, actually, I think I've got something to offer here, particularly international students. I think I can help people brush up their resume, show them my approach to analysing a job description, and then how you formulate your interview responses based on that. And so I created a workshop called the Big Break Workshop. I thought I was very clever with my title. And so I started running that for, I think, $50 cash in hand in the Deakin University Library. And I did that for a few years alongside working at Cricket Australia. And so So yeah, it kind of it didn't drop off completely, but there was definitely like a massive lag between drops of episodes. But one other thing that kind of kept encouraging me along the way was how responsive people were. So during that time, I interviewed a guy called Chris Niku. Chris Niku is the outgoing chairman of Football Australia. At the time when I reached out to him, he was a director on the board, also involved in the Melbourne Renegades. And I found his LinkedIn profile and just shot him a message and said, hey, are you interested in coming on my YouTube channel? And he sent me a message back saying, hey, Reuben, would love to, but I'm about to go off to the FIFA World Cup in Russia. Perhaps we can do it sometime down the track. And I said to him, that's okay. I'm going to Russia too. So tried to meet up with him in Moscow, didn't work. Tried to find him in Kazan, didn't work. Eventually found him in Samara, which is like, way out east in Siberia, somewhere around him. And he said to me, come to Skazkar restaurant at 12 noon on the day that Australia play in Denmark and we'll do this interview. So I rock up there and trying to look for this guy who's, hasn't updated his LinkedIn profile picture in a few years, and eventually find him. We sit down, do the interview. Halfway through the interview, some random person comes across and says, excuse me, Chris, can I borrow you for a second? And I look up and it's Stephen Lowy, one of the billionaires from the family who own the Westfield Group. And I was like, okay, I'll let you go talk to the billionaire chairman at the time. So Chris came back, and one of the really interesting things at the time was we were talking about the potential for Australia to host a FIFA Women's World Cup. The bid hadn't been successful at that point in time. And so I was getting all this amazing information. Then afterwards, Chris says, do you want to come inside? We've got a family and friends function in there. So there's Tim Cahill's kids running around. There's the board, the CEO, the rest of it. And I just thought, this is incredible. Like, Reuben, you can't stop doing this because you're meeting some amazing people and getting some amazing information along the way.
And so was that trip, you just did that as a fan wanting to take on board more experiences and see world sport in different parts of the world? Yeah.
So my first ever full-time paycheck came through in about October 2017, and that was around the time that FIFA World Cup tickets went out, and I spent my entire paycheck at once.
So that's amazing. So it sort of gave you that bit of the kick up the bum to go, one, I can get access to some awesome people. You still had this, constant feedback of how do I do what you do? People looking at you, oh, you're living the life, one, you're working at cricket. How do I do it? And then obviously the world changes. COVID happens. Like, again, what was that experience like? It wasn't great for everyone else, but trying to transition through that and then effectively figure out what to do next.
Yeah, you're right. Like, COVID was, challenging for a lot of different reasons for a lot of different people. And talking to my friends, I kind of find ourselves almost lucky to be at this age when COVID happened because, I didn't have a mortgage. I didn't have dependents to look after. My salary got cut from an entry-level wage down to JobKeeper, which there's not much difference in. So I was in a good stage of life to be able to, to take a risk on something. And so when Cricket Australia announced that 80% of staff were going to be stood down for 9.5 weeks, I thought, this is the best opportunity you are ever going to get in your life to take a punt on this random idea that you've had that's got 30 subscribers just sitting there that you haven't, really looked after properly. And so I actually got a lot of inspiration through Tim Ferriss's book, The 4-Hour Workweek. And I've never read a book so quick in my life. And 9 days after finishing that book, which is all about how to create a business that allows you to work and travel and create the lifestyle that you want. 9 days after finishing that, I moved to Lorne on the coast of Victoria on the Great Ocean Road. And that was where I began work on building up SportsGrad, getting ready to relaunch it. And so I moved down to this little studio pad because I was a bit cheeky. You weren't meant to move around that point in time. And so I jumped onto Airbnb and asked them, hey, what's your best rate? So I got this 5-star couples retreat for about 33% of, what they're normally asking for. And that became my den for the next 8 weeks. And I spent the first 4 weeks of that on the phone and on Zoom to students, trying to ask them, what is it like being a student getting a job in sport? What are the main challenges that you have? And created this wall of sticky notes of insights, just kind of, writing down quotes, writing down themes, all that sort of stuff. And so really tried to get clear on the problem that people have getting a job in sport. The next thing I did was I called up my friend Ryan, who was working in the partnerships team at Cricket Australia, and we sat side by side for the last 6 months of our time there. And I said to him, hey, I've been doing this YouTube thing by myself for a while. It's pretty lonely. Do you want to do it together as a podcast? And he's lying there on his bed, middle of COVID, and he goes, oh, yeah, well, I guess that'd be all right. And I said to him, well, we can just do the podcast for maybe 3 months, see how it goes. And, if it's no good after that, we'll quit, go back to do whatever we're doing. So then we take these insights, we start to think more considerately about, who's this podcast for? What problem does it actually solve? And, what questions do we need to ask our guests to actually help and address those problems? And so we record the first few episodes, and we're getting ready to also return to work, because at this point in time, we thought from July 1, all Cricket Australia staff are going back to work. And about a week before we were due to return to work, I got a call from my executive general manager, Steph Beltrami. She says, Reuben, unfortunately, Cricket Australia has been hit harder than first thought. We've got to make a whole bunch of roles redundant, and that includes your role. And I was like, Steph, this is really bad timing, because I'm about to start a podcast about getting jobs in sport, not losing jobs in sport. So can you make someone else redundant? Yeah. So she said, no, Reuben, we can't do that. So I kind of, grieved in that for a bit, and then picked myself up and thought, well, this podcast isn't going to launch itself. So 1 week, if you're following my content on LinkedIn, 1 week I came out and said, hey, I've lost my job. Who's got something? The next week I came out and said, hey, I know this is ironic, but here's a podcast, how to get a job in sport. And then I realized the greatest marketing hack of all time, and that is sympathy. Because straight away, people tune into it. The podcast went to number 1 on the careers charts within 3 days, because I think people just, saw this guy had lost his job. He's now got a podcast. Let's support him in some way. Everyone's sitting in COVID. And so we got a lot of early traction early on, which we thought, this is amazing. Like, if you do something good in sport, you're in a stadium with, thousands of people screaming for you. If you hit number 1 on the charts in COVID, you're in a room by yourself, just patting yourself on the back. So
yeah, it's a strange, because it was a strange time, and we were in Melbourne, in the most lockdown city in the world, but also it was a time of great change for a lot of people. So a lot of career uncertainty, which is why it was lapped up. I mean, I was running the sports biz Zoom calls where I was just like, everybody, we're all in the same boat. And I was like,
we met a couple of podcast guests through that, actually. Yeah, Carlo Kasparian in particular.
Yeah. So we had 70 people. Like, what are we all doing? We're all working at home. What are we trying to work? And so it was a bit of a group therapy session to a certain degree. But I can see why it also, took off, because the problem that you were looking at hadn't gone away. And you still had authority because you did actually get a job. And then, I think the bit that was, fascinating, because, we'd talked a few times, and you were doing the meetups, and obviously meetups don't happen during COVID. And then I think, the pivot to one, doing that regular content, but then also when was the change to sort of go, hey, we're going to, what's the business model around it? Like building out this community, sort of go from, what you were doing, some career coaching and those kind of things, to say, hey, we want to build this community, have people support one another. And you discussed it when you chatted to me, that Kevin Kelly, 1,000 fans. When did you and Brian start saying, well, hang on, it's great to do a podcast? And everyone goes, oh, you're a podcaster. How's things going? And you still got to build a business around it. When did you start forming those pieces and some of those key planks to say, hey, this is what SportsGrad is, going forward, at least in that initial instance?
Yeah. So after the podcast kind of validated itself, like, right, we've hit something here. I had lost my job, so I'm looking for someone else. Ryan got kept on, so he's still working full-time at Cricket Australia. And I remember I was walking around a park listening to a podcast by Brendan Bouchard, I think, and it was like one of his just, quick podcasts where he talks about 10 ways to make money off content or whatever. And one of them was a subscription membership, idea. And I thought, that'd be interesting. It'd be a good way to have, consistent, money coming in, because one of the other tough things was constantly trying to sell your career coaching service all the time. We can also do it one-to-many. And so the podcast launched on like the 28th of June, 2020. And I think it was like, around, 4 or 5 months later, at the end of October, that we launched the first version of the community, which provided a space for job hunters to get extra networking and development opportunities. At that point in time, there were no job opportunities coming in there because we didn't have any connections with organisations. But the basis of it was, how can I do what I'm doing from a career coaching point of view, but rather than one-to-one, do it one-to-many. So a lot of the first webinars was just me teaching. And so that's where kind of a lot of, we now have a course available called the SportsGrad method. That's where a lot of that curriculum came to life, in just forcing myself to do a masterclass once a month and trying to play around with what can we actually teach these people.
And then so you're, again, you're building out this community of people looking for jobs. And then effectively, as sports started to awaken and reboot, did you sort of start building that other side of the market and saying, hey, Cricket Australia, hey, AFL, I've got some really talented folk here. And is that sort of, that being that connector, like here you are trying to teach people how to get a job, if you can actually facilitate it, is that sort of where the jobs board and sort of getting those, starting to get those connections? Because, there's always businesses and sports business going, oh, where do we find the best grads, or where do we find the best talent? Is that where that sort of jobs board, that sort of piece of the business started to kick along? Yeah,
exactly right. So initially we just kind of said to everyone, like, we'll post your jobs. If you've got something going, we'll add it to the community. And the organisations love that, because they were putting their jobs in front of a pool of people who were really motivated to invest in their career. Like the people who are signing up now, they're putting down $350 a year to network and to learn new things, to access our resources. And that's a certain type of, there's a certain type of person who does that. And so for an organisation to put their job in front of those kinds of people, it kind of brought the pool of candidates down significantly for them. Like if Cricket Australia chucks up like a team operations job on Seek, they're going to get 600 plus people applying for that who just want to be close to the Australian cricket team. But if they put that in SportsGrad, then we've got 700 members at the moment who are all proactive and doing the right things. They'll get a smaller pool of people applying for it, but rather than 90% not actually fitting the job description and 10% gold, you'll get the opposite split where 90% will be switched on and there'll be a couple who miss a mark. So yeah, that's when that started to really build out.
And then now, in a post-COVID world, you've rebooted the meetups in a regular space and doing them in different parts of both Australia and in the world. How is that sort of, how is the community, engaging with that, and how are those events now going?
Yeah, the events, I'd say, are almost probably the best part of what we're doing, because people just love coming together and connecting. So we ran our first meetup in, I reckon it was February 2021, which you came along to, and there were, I think we had like about 110 people on the rooftop of the Richmond Club Hotel. It was about 35 degrees at 6 p.m. that night after the Australian Open had just been on, and that, to be able to see our audience in the flesh for the first time really hit home, and to get 100 people off the bat was amazing too. And so those have evolved over time. And one thing that, we probably didn't realize we were doing was building out all these different kind of product offerings, because we were just kind of playing around with all these different things. We started with a podcast, and then you had the membership, and then there was a meetup event, and, even some of the things that we do within the community could be like a separate thing on themselves, such as the course and curriculum that we offer. And some of them have started to kind of merge together. So the meetups, they started as free events in the pub, come along, just whoever's there, we'll put the right people in the room. Now they're a bit more sophisticated. It's about $50 to come along. You get to hear from a couple of guest speakers. We'll do some things to try and connect people in the room, put on food and drink, all that sort of stuff. But now it's also a party membership. So one thing that we changed earlier this year was we got rid of the monthly membership because the value of the community is so heavily hinged upon the people. You know, there's a certain type of person who just dips their toe in. There's a certain type of person who says, you know, I'm all in this. And that's the kind of person who we really want to be around and to help. And that we think, you know, the sports industry needs more of and deserves. And so now the meetups have become, you know, they're a part of what you get with your membership, and they're a great place for members to finally meet each other in person. And we've run about probably 25 meetups or so over the last few years, primarily up the east coast of Australia. But I was in India at the start of this year and ran a couple there, and went to London in the middle of the year, and we had 120 people at that one, which kind of blew my mind that, you know, there's all this interest on the other side of the world. So I think in the future we'd love to grow those events, you know, far and wide, so that people can know that no matter where they're traveling to in the world, there's an event happening nearby that can help them connect with the people on the ground.
And is there you're obviously natural at the networking game and meeting people and sort of getting out there. Is there tips for people who, you know, is there a networking for introverts sort of guide, or like to help people, you know, get out of them, get out of their own way to a certain degree? Yeah,
so I'm a natural introvert, so I've had to learn a lot of extroverted skills. When I was in university, the first time I ever reached out to someone to have coffee with them, I had their phone number, punched it into my phone, but then for the next 25 minutes I was pacing around my backyard doing this, trying to bring myself to press call. We've come a long way since then, but so I can totally empathise for those introverts who find it difficult. So on the podcast, probably a year ago now, but we did do like a networking series of, you know, all the do's and don'ts. And, you know, one simple thing is just, you know, come prepared with a couple of fallback questions. Because I think the thing that hits people or is the scariest is ending up in a situation where you don't know what to say and you're kind of standing there awkwardly like, where does this go? So if you've got a couple of fallback questions that you can go to next, and at least that's your safety net. Or for example, you know, if you're going to meet with someone one-on-one, you know, at least do your research on that person so you can, you know, ask a few more considered questions, or, you know, keep an eye on what's going on with Linked, for example. Like, I know you're a massive Collingwood supporter, so, you know, it's a great, easy talking point. So I think a lot of the nerves can be taken out of networking just with a bit of preparation.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and for the most part, if you, like, as an introvert, like, if you just ask the question, like a lot, you know, we're both in the podcast game, but everyone likes talking about themselves. And so it's like, how, you know, what do you do in your job? Or, you know, how long have you been there? What projects you're working on? All of those kind of questions are very easy questions for people. And then the only other thing I find when I'm at your events is, hey guys, pull out your phone, grab your LinkedIn and do the swap right there.
Yeah.
Right. And just be, you know, hey, or you know, the reverse of that is remember everyone you went to and said, hey, Reuben, good to meet you at the meetup. Cheers. And so then they go, oh, if they don't remember, they go, oh, I must have met them at the meetup. And so you make that connection. You don't know where it'll be later. It's not making the big old ask, oh, can you get me a job?
Totally.
It's just like make the connection. And then if you're doing things like sharing what you're doing, they become more familiar with you. And so the next time you're starting to build a rapport.
100%, because, like, you know, you can do all this preparation for someone who you might chat with for 10 minutes, and it's up to you to decide whether the interaction ends after 10 minutes or can literally, you know, extend to the rest of your career.
Yep.
So I've just done a trip to Europe and back, and one of the great experiences I had was watching the Socceroos play England in a football match at Wembley, sitting in a box with Samantha Kerr. And the invitation to that came through a girl called Kiri, who I met during my internship at Australian University Sport 7 years ago. And I kind of felt like, oh, gee, this is like, you know, all the effort put into just staying in touch with people feels like it's cultivating in one amazing experience right now. And, you know, there's been a number of different examples where, like, all these random and wonderful things come up, but, you know, what you do in that moment's great, but it's what you do after that counts.
It is the very much, to use a baseball analogy, it's lots of singles, not swinging for the home run. I think where there is an issue where it's, you know, straight up, you know, ghost connecting where they just hit you up. You're like, I don't know who you are. There's no context. Or, meeting someone and just quizzing them on what jobs are available. It's like they're not there for that. But you don't know when, that person leaves that job and comes to another job, and those kind of things that can really open up, down the track. And I think, the events, especially in, towns like Melbourne that's really sports focused, like getting everyone together and being able to find out what other people are doing, because you get so focused on, your job, whether it's you're in cricket or you're in basketball, you don't have the time to find out. And it's a very, competitive, sports a weird competitive space. Yep. Right. Where, yes, Carlton are playing Collingwood and sometimes that bleeds into the off the field. It's like, well, it doesn't need to be, it doesn't need to be that. Yep. So it is quite funny how, sport is very different. Yep. In that instance. Yeah.
One thing we have noticed through our membership and through our events is that they do tend to attract a lot of relocators. So people who didn't grow up in the town that the event is in. So we get a lot of people from Perth or Tasmania or whatever who come to Melbourne who become a member as a way to tap into a pre-existing network. And it's those people that we find have the most success with their career, because I think there's another part of networking that people find difficult, and that is, the perception of like, what are my friends and family going to think? And I know I certainly held that for years going through university. And I think when you're in your hometown and you've got friends who are in other industries who aren't networking as much because, there's a straight line from an accounting degree into a placement at KPMG Bank or whatever, then, it's not the norm for you. Whereas these people who come from another state can almost break away and be a new person, and then they get ahead because of that. So for any people trying to network in their home city, I'd almost encourage them, like, get out a bit more, because, it's those close circles that kind of restrict the limits of your career.
And it is, I guess there's also that, and I guess it's something that you put in your curriculum, that misconception of what sport is and what it actually is. Like, the glamour of seeing the big trophy presentations or being at big events and those and going, oh, that's the exciting part. But it's also all the work that happens behind the scenes. There's not a lot of glamour to it. You do get the high rewards of being, seeing some famous, plays, or, being, in the background when something amazing is happening on the court or the field. But is there a little bit of trying to debunk some of those myths with your community in helping understand and be grounded and sort of potentially, making them better interviewees than the one of the random 600 that have applied via Seek to go, why do you want to work in cricket? Because I love cricket, right? And you've got to get past that.
Yeah, I think most people start out as a fan, and everyone's got, a moment that kind of triggered them to be like, I really want to work in sport. And there's always that, thrill of getting to meet Steve Smith or whoever it might be. For me, like, I had a bit of feedback in my second year of uni where a mentor of mine said to me, Reuben, lose your entitlement. And that kind of said to me, like, all right, I need to make sure that, I understand that a job in sport is not just going to happen for me. I'm going to have to work for it, and I'm going to have to figure out what I can offer sport. Because one thing I tell a lot of people is sport doesn't care what you can do. It cares what you can do for them. And so you've got to make sure that you are always solving a problem. And unless you're doing that, then it's going to be extremely hard to get a shoe in. So, for example, like I was in India a couple of weeks ago, and I was chatting to this student, and he was like, I love football. And, I know every single stat. I know every single player. Like, I can analyze it all. Like, why won't anyone give me an opportunity? And I was like, well, why don't you talk to the sports? Why don't you talk to the people in these roles and find out what are their problems and issues and gaps in their skill set they've got, or gaps in their capability that they have in their teams at the moment, and find out what you can do for them. Because if someone came to me and said, hey, Reuben, I saw that your social media content has dropped off on TikTok recently, how come you're not posting as much? And you're like, oh, well, we had someone leave the team. It's like, well, have you got anyone covering for that? Oh, not really. Like, we've just been busy with all this other stuff. We'll get back to it. I can do that for you. problem solved. Like you've got an opportunity. So I think if people can reverse the mindset of, what I can do, of losing, I just want to work in sport, and think about how you can serve sport, then that's when the opportunities present themselves.
Definitely. And, from a perspective of sport, there is a lot of people that want that job. And so it's like the people that can think outside the box, can solve problems that are outside their role, can, improve processes, understand, the goals of the organisation. Like if you can help us sell more tickets, you will always be around, so understanding that piece. And so when I'm talking to different people in different roles, it is that they're like, oh, we sell tickets. And if we sell the most tickets, that's exactly what our role is. And our whole team's driven towards that. But there is always, look over your shoulder, like you're building a community of people ready to take, their job, because it's like they're hungry, want to work in sport. And then once they get into it, they understand, I guess, the machinations of sport, how it works. So where do you see SportsGrad going? Because again, like when you started it and you sort of did it as your project and it got you your job, how do you, is there a process to keep those people in your community because they will help, pass on their knowledge and grow the group? Like how does SportsGrad evolve as your audience and your community evolves?
Yeah, one of the great things that we've noticed within the community is that there is this really nice culture of pay it forward. So there's hundreds of members who have got their first job, but they hang around and they comment on our Discord channels, and they read other people's resumes, and they have coffee with members who haven't yet make it because they're all there to help each other. But we community is at the heart of everything that we do, and we really want to build this amazing group of people right around the world. And I think it kind of first hit me in January early this year when I was on a trip to India, and I was heading to Mumbai for the first time. And one of our members called Jai Agarwal, he reached out to me and said, "Hey, Reuben, if you come to Mumbai, can I pick you up from the airport?" And Jai was probably one of our first 20 members, but I've never seen his face or heard his voice because every time we jump on Zoom, his technology is so poor that, he's just this blank screen with a name. So I got this invitation from a faceless man to be picked up from the airport in a country I'd never been to before at that point. But I said yes and met Jai, who's a reasonable guy, and he came in his tuk-tuk and took me out for dinner, and we had a great chat about his career. And I kind of went home that night and thought, what an amazing way to be welcomed to a new country. And what if we could create that experience for everyone in our community, no matter if you are looking for a new job or you just want to go watch sport with someone interesting or have coffee with someone in the sports industry in town. If we could set that up in Australia, India, the UK, Europe, US, then that would make so many people's lives and careers easier. And so to grow that, we've launched SportsGrad Pro for working full-time professionals. And so over time, we want this community to build up. If we do our job properly and help people get jobs, and they should graduate from one to the next. And so we're building up this new community of professionals and doing similar sort of stuff, giving them learning opportunities to connect, job opportunities. But if we can really, connect more dots between pro and grad and spread that around the world, then we'll have done our job.
Because the getting in is relatively hard. It's not to diminish that, but then also that navigating. I'm starting as a digital coordinator, or I'm starting as an operations assistant. To hey, where do you want to get to, or and a lot of people will, a lot of grads will get in a role and go, I didn't think this is what I studied for, and actually become, into events, right? And, talking to Jane Fernandez around the Women's World Cup, and that's where she was. She was in events, and then she's running a major event, 15 years down the line. So I can see how, that transfer of knowledge and some of the stuff is the same, but some of it's different. And then you've also got people jumping from a sport to another sport, and should you make that leap? And it's a different role, but I'll learn a different sport. And so it does make sense that that's how your community will evolve.
Yeah. So when I was at Cricket Australia, one of the line items on my professional development plan was, Reuben, grow your network within the sports industry. But when you're in your early 20s in your first role, you're not getting invited to the conferences. Your only option is really to try and message people cold on LinkedIn. And even for me at that point in time, like that, felt icky and awkward. And so what we really want SportsGrad Pro to be is kind of that always-on conference where you do have connections to other people who do want to talk, because there are a lot of people who just don't respond to your messages. So that, if you are the marketing coordinator at Cricket Australia, you can talk to the marketing coordinator at NRL and learn about what each other are doing and ultimately help each other, because if all sport gets better, then, the world becomes an awesome place.
Terrific. I want to wrap things up with the Sports Geek Closing 5, which I'd close my interviews with. Do you remember the first sports event you ever attended?
I reckon it was a one-day international match between Australia and the West Indies at the SCG. And I remember Brian Lara being on the fence and I was too scared to ask for his autograph.
No, that's all right. It's a good memory. Now, you've mentioned a few different places around the world that you've been to sport. Do you have a favourite food memory or a go-to food when you're at a sports event?
Oh, go-to food. Most recently I was in India at the Cricket World Cup, and I was at Ahmedabad Stadium, which is a massive 130,000 one, and they've just got all these like little tents at the back of like pre-packaged food. And I was amused to see that McDonald's had a tent and they were serving all these like pre-packaged, veggie burgers, which like there was no chefs or ovens or anything nearby. So they're just getting shipped in. So, I had a pre-made McDonald's veggie burger at the Cricket World Cup.
Oh, terrific. What's the first app you open in the morning? You've got members all around the world. What's the thing that you check first?
Notion. So on Notion, I've created myself a little digital dashboard, which is kind of the front page of my life.
Yep.
And that kind of helps me understand, Reuben, what are you working on today, this month, this year, and, what's on your to-do list today to make sure you're hitting all that. So if there was an app that kind of create that for me and I didn't have to build it myself, that'd be nice. But Notion gives you that flexibility. Yeah,
I'm a big fan of Notion. We've got the AI in there, and it's now got AI Q&A facilities where you can just ask questions to all the stuff that you're putting into Notion. So it's quite powerful in that way. Is there someone that you follow, whether it might be a fellow podcaster or it might be an author, that you suggest the podcast listeners check out?
So there's I'll give you one that like I am following, and it may not suit other people's goals and not directly related to sport, but for me and the journey that I'm on, we're all about building internet communities first. And there's a guy called Greg Eisenberg on LinkedIn and Twitter who's posting a lot of interesting content in that space. I can't reel off the list of things that he's done, but he's a clever guy and I like his content. So Greg Eisenberg is his name.
Yeah, I follow him as well on a few different platforms, but there is that he's sort of in that space of moving, not quite the creator economy, but creator economy meets community economy, yes. And sort of the models around that and how it can be built out and effectively become, niche media, but it's, of high value to a smaller audience. So, yeah, he is worth a good follow. And, again, he's always sharing different models, which obviously would give you inspiration. Then lastly, what social media platform is your MVP that's worked the best for you from personal and a SportsGrad point of view?
Yeah, hands down LinkedIn. So I think the beauty of LinkedIn for us is, everyone's there for their career. We're posting career-related content, and so that's where our message seemed to really hit home. Prior to that, we're on, Instagram and YouTube, and it took, years to take off. But then, a couple of weeks on LinkedIn and it went bananas. The other beautiful thing about LinkedIn is that I saw a stat around the number of profiles that actually post content on LinkedIn. And it's like 1%. Like everyone's got a profile, but only 1% post content. Whereas you think about that on Instagram or TikTok, like everyone's posting content all the time. So getting cut through is a lot harder. So, LinkedIn became a good space for us.
It is a terrific space. We will link to your LinkedIn in the show notes. I highly recommend people connect with you. And again, because LinkedIn has that, it still has that professional angle. Again, my advice is just share a little bit of your job. Like celebrate. You are in an amazing position to take amazing photos. To say, look at me. And you'll obviously get a lot of people patting you on the back to be in a spot, but it is a great way to stay connected. And you also don't know how many people are lurking, even if they're not liking. I think I found early on for SportsGeek, I'd read something and I'd put it on LinkedIn, and then people would say, "Oh, I'm reading your stuff on LinkedIn." I'm like, "Oh, that's where most of the audience is." And again, because I think you're right. It's like 2% of people post, and most people don't post. But it does, it does attract an audience of people who can congregate around that. I don't know if you've ever, they probably locked it down, but there was tools that can sort of do a little, like a string diagram of where all your connections are.
I haven't seen that.
I don't know if it's still available. It was back in the days when you could download all your data and have a look at it. But so mine looks quite strange because you can go, there's my early IT career and all the people that I connected with when I was before SportsGeek. And then it's like, there's all the people in North American sport that I connected with. So when I was doing trips or meeting conferences, and then, there's the Aussie sports scene and that kind of stuff. And so it's quite, great opportunity. And my advice, and so when I've ever tried to connect with a particular team or whatever, I've always connected with the entry-level either interns or the sales folk because they're really open to it.
Yep.
And then what happens is as I move up the tree in that same org and I pitch to the CEO or the CMO, they go, "Oh, hang on, Sean's connected with 100 people in the org. They all must know him in some way." And then they would hit yes to connect. So there's a real power in a community that you're building to say, if you're connecting with fellow people that are selling tickets or fellow event operations folk at your, at that entry level or early in your career, it's really powerful because one, you will meet up at one of your meetups, but then you don't know where those connections will go.
No,
so
exactly. If I could leave your listeners with one other low hanging bit of fruit, I think it's great to connect with people, but just posting the irregular bit of content as well makes a huge difference because it means your next conversations are starting with, "Hey, I saw you were doing this recently. How's it going?" Or it creates a reason for people to reach out for you. But one problem we see a lot of people face is they don't know what to post, or they feel like they need to be this authoritative voice who's got some amazing insight. One easy thing you can do is if you're going to an event, is literally just stick your hand up in the air with your phone, take a photo, post online saying, "Hey, I went to this today. This is what happened." You're literally doing like a brief report on it. And all you're really communicating to your audience is, "I was there." And that signals to people that you're the kind of person who gets out, goes to these events. And, you may not have talked to anybody. You may not have played a significant role, but that sends a certain type of message to people's minds, which can be extremely impactful.
Yep. And if you were to, and again, it's much for yourself as that, and it was great to meet at Reuben, at Sean, and just tag all the people that you met.
Yeah.
Right. And it automatically, most of those people will come back and reply, "Great to meet you," all of that kind of stuff. And it sends a signal to the algorithm, really to say, "Hey, I was there." But again, it makes it easier for you to, one, remember, who did I meet, those kind of things, but also for the people you met. So big fan of all things LinkedIn, and I think training the next generation of people coming through to say, how do they use that? It becomes a better feed for everyone because everyone's sharing different learnings and lessons that you can take on.
Yeah, it's much better than just saying certificate after certificate.
Exactly. So lastly, we'll put the links in the show notes, but where should people go to find out all things about SportsGrad?
Yeah, sure. So, search SportsGrad on Google and you'll find our website where there's links to the community and the SportsGrad Pro community there. Otherwise, SportsGrad on Instagram, SportsGrad on LinkedIn, and SportsGrad on Spotify and Apple Podcasts if you want to hear about the journeys of people in the sports industry.
Well, thank you very much for coming on the pod.
Thank you very much for having me.
Learn from the Sports Geek Amplify Season 2 cohort. Trajectory, Extenet, SeatGeek, Sponsor CX, and Stats Perform. For more, go to sportsgeekamplify.com.
Thanks again to Reuben Williams. As he said, you can find Reuben on LinkedIn. He is doing a mountain of content on LinkedIn. If you're not connected with and seeing Reuben's content, then very much the same as me. He's not doing his job right, but he is doing his job right. You can reach him on Twitter X, Reuben Williams _ is his handle. But really, go check out sportsgrad.com.au. And sign up. And it's not restricted to graduates and young professionals that are in Australia. As he said, there are people joining from all over the world looking to further their careers. And you can also listen to his podcast. There'll be links in the show notes for his podcast because I was a guest on Reuben's podcast, on the SportsGrad podcast. So it was a bit of a crossover episode, this one. He interviewed me and I interviewed him. We'll put all the links in the show notes, sportsgeekhq.com/356. Quickly wrap this up. I just really want to hear back from you. What do you want from Sports Geek in 2024? Whether that is from a content point of view, in what we do with our podcast, who should be a guest, the particular guests you want to hear from, or the particular topics you want us to dive in on. Send me an email. Let me know. I'd love to, lean into the content that you want. And also, from our email offering, our Sports Geek News, it's currently under renovation, trying to figure out what the next iteration of it is. Over the years, it has shared insights and articles, some of my opinions, obviously the podcasts, sort of playing around with the format. If you're a subscriber, thank you very much. You can go and subscribe by going to sportsgeekhq.com/SGN. But if you've got any feedback on what it should do, and similarly to Reuben and the SportsGrad guys, is there something that I can assist you from an education point of view? I have contemplated the digital dollars as an online course or a webinar series. I've done it a few times with grassroots sports. I'm thinking about spinning that off and running that a few times, both online or potentially in person. If that's training and that kind of education series, something you'd be interested in, I'd love to get your feedback on it. And then, is it something else? Remember, we can assist your team in a project or an advisory capacity, whether it's in the space of digital or social, commercial, understanding how you can do things in that space, technology, what tools should you be using? A lot of the time it's helping clean up the tool set for a digital team and improve workflows. It's a lot of the stuff that we do with clients. If that's something you want us to look at, please reach out. Sports Geek HQ is where you can find us. Sean at Sports Geek HQ is where you can find me. Until next episode, my name is Sean Callanan, and you've been listening to Sports Geek.
Looking to help your digital or sponsorship team? Book in for a Pick My Brain session with Sean Callanan to help your team level up. Book now at sportsgeekhq.com/pickmybrain. Want to help drive more revenue from your digital efforts? Book a time for a call. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/phone call.